So your midterm is a week from this Thursday. Is it Thursday? No, it's Tuesday. In class here, same place, same time. Yes. Should it be 9:25? That seems highly likely. Is he right? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so you don't need a blue book. You don't need a calculator, but well, you shouldn't need a calculator, but you're certainly welcome to bring one. So a study guide and past exams will pop up on VSpace on Thursday on the resources page next Tuesday, which actually is 9/23. So you can look at this and it tells you something about rationality that I think 2 different days have the same date. So exam review of the Tuesday before each of the exams. Your GSIs will conduct that review. This is just an admonition. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Most people, I think, find that being in a study group is immensely helpful. So if you're not in one, I would say rush to get into one, and feel free to use Piazza for the purpose of finding a study group, but make sure that you include your name because Piazza is set up to be so that you're anonymous to one another. I think, is that right? You're anonymous to one another? What? It's your choice. Okay, well, so make sure you choose the appropriate choice. Okay. I'll tell you what, why don't we do this? Let's take a vote. Here are your choices. I talk, you don't. You talk, I don't. Now see, I'm taking a risk, right? Because I bet there's a lot of you that are thinking, come on, all we have to do is 51% and you won't talk. I wouldn't follow through on that, so let's go with you don't talk and I do. Okay, so we talked about implications, normative implications, about rationality, the normative, evaluative usefulness of our models once we let go of rationality. And now we're going to talk just about some applications of reference dependence in the real world. This is where we start, right? There's 2 parts of this adventure. One is to say, hey, with this model, can we explain things that we otherwise would be puzzled by? And, which is closely related, can we find real world evidence in markets that really matter, like stocks and bonds or housing markets, where we can sort of show that big-ticket real-world consumer behavior violates rationality in exactly the same way as the stuff we saw in the lab, right? So we're going out into the real world to see what we can do with this model and how well it works. So we will look at choices about risks, and okay, I'm going to have to apologize to you. This is an old outline. Everything we're going to be doing today is choices about risks, and we'll get to labor supply later. I hope that's right. I should let you know, because it's helpful sometimes for me to be candid about where I'm at personally. My father was diagnosed with liver cancer last Wednesday, and so I'm doing my best to stay on top of the basics, but if I seem a little bit spaced out at times, it's probably because my thoughts are elsewhere. So I'll do my best if you do your best. Deal? All right. Clicker. So here we go. Suppose I offer to make you the following bet, okay? Guys, can I ask you to stay on board with what we're trying to accomplish? Thanks. Okay, so the bet is this. First we'll flip a coin, which, a fair coin, you can trust it's 50-50 coin. If it comes up heads, you give me $500. I know you're good for it somewhere. You can put it on a credit card, borrow it from someone. You pay me $500. Tails, I pay you $550, okay? So first question is just real straightforward. Make sure we all understand what we're talking about. What is the expected value of this bet? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 5, 3, 2, 0. Okay, so what did you say? Good, so most of you said C, which is the correct answer. And by the way, if you're going out there into the great wide world of making decisions about risky things, like whether or not to buy an insurance policy or whether or not to throw dice with some guy you meet on a street corner, you should always start by thinking about the expected value of the gamble that you're facing. So what do? The coin tells us what the probabilities are. They are 0.5 and 0.5, right? It's a 50-50 coin. And the outcomes are with 50% probability you get 550, and with 50% probability you lose 500. So the expected value is an extremely simple computation. It's 1/2 times 550 plus 1/2 times negative 500. You do that math, you get $25. Good? Everyone comfortable with that? So according to economists, the financial value, the monetary value of this thing is $25. Now, let me ask you guys a question. No, sorry, let me not ask you a question yet. I'll ask you this question in a minute. So the next question is, would you accept this bet right here and right now? The winner pays the loser next Tuesday, which gives you a minute to go and collect the money, maybe wash the dishes to earn the money if you need to. So again, so just put yourself in the situation where these are real stakes. It's your money. You've got to go and think about where it's coming from and what you would give up if you didn't have it. Meanwhile, I'm going to give you real money and you'll have that to spend. Yes or no? Personal preference. Good? Are you guys making a deal to share the proceeds? Yeah. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm dying to know because I can make a lot of money here. Okay, 72% of you, enough to make this really discouraging for me. Now, this is, of course, this is what we expect. Most of you say no, right? Let me ask you another question, closely related to the first, but different in ways that will be important. Suppose I gave you $10,000 up front, just yours to keep, and then I offer you a bet just like the other one. Heads, you give me back the $10,000 I just gave you. Tails, I give you $20 million. Okay? Now, we're out on a limb here, because there's some uncertainty in your mind as to whether or not I actually have $20 million. But let's just pretend I'm good for it. What are your preferences? This one's even easier to answer, isn't it? Okay, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. Anybody want to guess what we're going to see? Everybody says yes. Now, I'm tempted at this point to just focus on these people, right? Like, really? But let's come back to that. We'll see whether or not that's something that we're interested in. So this is my guess is that to you guys you're sitting there going, not strange, of course, that makes perfect sense. Why would you be pointing this out? You know that the trick is that I'm going to tell you that that's ridiculous, that it's a violation of rationality, or at least a violation of the standard model, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, I don't know why it should be, it seems perfectly reasonable to me. By the way, those are for sure the answers I would have given if I were in your shoes. Now, we'll come back to those results in a second. Hang on, there was something I wanted to say. So this was overwhelmingly the modal answer here, no, which suggests, right, have most or all of you seen some model of risk preferences, risk aversion, risk seeking, all that kind of stuff? It's usually taught in 100A, but sometimes not. We'll talk about it a little bit. So what this answer suggests is that you are risk averse enough to reject that bet. And if you say yes here, it says you're not risk averse, averse enough God forbid anybody be dependent upon my handwriting to understand what I'm saying. So risk averse enough to accept, not risk averse enough to reject. Okay? What I'm going to show you in a slide or two is why that is a problem for the standard model. So let's first remind ourselves what the standard model is. Okay, so the standard model is based on expected utility theory, EU theory. And the basic psychology is simple. People decide whether to, so we start with the assumption that people decide whether to take on risks by weighing the utility, the upside of the risk against the disutility of the downside of the risk. Now, I want to be really clear that the upside does not necessarily mean a gain relative to a reference point, nor does the downside necessarily mean a loss. Right, so if I offer you the gamble with 50% probability I give you $10,000 and with 50% probability I give you $20 million, there's no loss in the picture. But there's still an upside and a downside. The upside being, typically we think of the upside as what you gain relative to the expected value or relative to what you would have to pay for it or something like that. So we'll talk in terms of upside and downside, and it's importantly different from gain and loss relative to a reference point. And the reason that the difference matters, if I have not told you the reason the difference matters in the next two slides, someone raise your hand. So we have this idea that what people do is they say, here's the downside. Possibility A is that I get $10,000 and I get to keep it. Possibility B is I get $20 million. Now, rather than me thinking about the expected value of the bet, and then thinking about how I feel about the expected value, let me first think about how I feel about each of these outcomes. What's the utility I would gain from 10,000? What's the utility I would gain from 20 million? And let me take the average of those two. And so it's just a simple question of, do you do the averaging first and then think about how you feel about it? Or do you think about how you feel about all the possible outcomes and then do the averaging? The expected utility says you do the latter of those things. That's why it's expected utility instead of expected value. And then we have this tricky little thing called diminishing marginal utility, which is very similar to the diminishing marginal sensitivity that we've seen in prospect theory, which is as a result of which the downside weighs more heavily than the upside. So let's take a look at this. Suppose that, so this is the first bet I gave you, the small stakes bet, 500 versus 550. So, whoops, we're going to run into this problem. So this X naught is consumption, right? It's wealth, whatever you want it to be. X naught is your current wealth. I'm not treating this as a reference point. It's just your current wealth. And so we can model the bet that I offered you as, there's a 50% chance that you're going to wind up at a wealth level of X naught plus 550, and there's a 50% chance you're going to wind up at a wealth level of X naught minus 500. I apologize for the miscalibration of my stylus. So relative to where you are, this is the upside, this is the downside. And as with the reference dependence model, you're going to care more about the downside than the upside, but for a very different reason. Okay? If you think about this, is right. So I said you start by sort of evaluating how you feel about each of these cases. How you feel is what's the height of your utility curve for that outcome, right? So how you feel about the downside, where you have to pay me $500, is your utility function for money evaluated at X naught minus 500. And how you feel about me giving you 550 is your utility function for money evaluated at X naught plus 550. Because of the curvature of your utility function, the value to you, right? This is the upside. So this is the upside in dollars and the downside in dollars. This is the upside in utils, which is the basis on which we think you make decisions, and that's the downside in utils. Okay? So indeed, even if this was a perfectly fair 50-50, 500-500 bet, right, or indeed even if you were winning rather more than 550, you can see that it's easy to get situations where you care very much more about the worse outcome than the better outcome. Why? What is the point of this curvature? This is a utility curve. Its slope is equal to what? What do we call the slope of the utility function? Marginal utility. It's the utility you get for one more dollar, and it's getting less steep as you go up. This is the dollar means less to a wealthy person than it does to a poor person, right? So what that means is I take away some money, and it reduces your wealth to the extent that you now actually value dollars more. Okay? Another way of saying that is because I'm pushing you down the wealth distribution, or down just taking away wealth from you and making you less wealthy, the dollars that I take away from you hurt more, not because you care more about losses and gains, but because you're less wealthy. So they literally you value them more. When you're poor, $10 gets you. I mean, if you've ever chatted with these folks on the streets, $5 gets you a room for the night at the shelter, which is probably worth a lot more than what, say, I with my modest but not unreasonable salary, $5 is not worth much to me. That's why we have this transfer on the streets. I give him $5, he gets a room. I lose what? A cup of coffee. So that's what drives risk preferences in the standard model. Is this idea that if you win the bet, you're in a realm of wealth where dollars don't matter that much, and if you lose the bet, you're in a realm of wealth where the dollars matter more. Now, so let me ask you guys a couple questions. Does this model of diminishing marginal sensitivity, the concavity of this thing, does that seem right to you intuitively? Does that make sense in terms of how you experience being a human being? Right? Is it believable? Do you think it's a reasonable assumption to say that a dollar to a wealthy person is worth less than a dollar to the same person when they're not wealthy? Okay, so we're not troubled by that. So take a deep breath and tell me seriously, raise your hand if you think there's a problem with that assumption of any kind. Yeah.
I'll say, actually, the most wealthy people I know, they treat money a lot more carefully than poor people.
$10?
Yeah, definitely.
A $10 bill.
They have like this philosophy of like everything counts. Like actually, I have a friend who makes over $1 million a year. He literally would pick up a penny on the street. And I mean, me personally, I'm nowhere in that range. I would not even think about it.
Well, we should have a conversation about how hard he'd work for the penny.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's set that aside. I think there's something. Yeah. So there are other things going on. But I think you probably mean something like in proportional terms. This person places a lot of emphasis on their money. But if you literally took a $10 bill and tried to find ways to see what that's really worth to someone, what they would give up to get that $10 bill, I think you'd find differences.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is, it seems right that maybe $1 would be worth less to some people money, but you don't necessarily take stock of like your entire wealth when you're making a decision like this.
That's right. I don't want them to know that because that's where we're going. Say your name.
Alex.
You're Alex. Aren't you Alex? Ah, snap. This is like a game, any of those games where you turn over cards and you have to remember where. Okay. So we're pretty much bought into the idea in general with some caveats. Alex has a weird friend. The other Alex has a point about, which is essentially going to become a point about narrow framing. So we'll get to that. Is this about the curve? Yeah, go. That's correct. That's right. Really, the idea here is that ceteris paribus is the same, and this is representing one person's preferences. That's right. And I think if you put it in that context, which is the correct one, I think it's even more plausible. I can tell you, having spent chunks of my life at relatively different levels of wealth, it works for me. It's true for me. Okay. Anybody just like off the bat want to say why this might be? I'm just using this to explain why you turned down 500, 550 even bet. Anybody want to just throw out why that might not be such a great model?
Get more utility, get more risk seeking, get more utility,
Right. So if you were risk-seeking, we'd have a different curve, and then we put you in a separate room just so you don't make trouble. But we're going with this assumption. Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, your second question, the 20 million, this would make sense, because 10,000 drop would put me much lower than the 20 million gain on logarithm.
It might. Let's see if that's true. Yeah.
Because of loss aversion, I would expect the utility function to be a little bit more disjoint. I know we're not calling it a reference point.
But that's yes, and that's not this model. So we're trying to do things in stepwise process here. This is the standard model, and what we're going to find is where it just can't possibly be the right model for just even the questions that I asked you on the clicker. So let me hold the thought. The answer I was looking for has to do with just the sheer smallness of these numbers, right? The 500 and 550 relative to your total wealth. So let's come back to that. That's going to be the key, and then that's going to turn out to be a big part of what's going on with other Alex's comment. Okay. So people exhibit risk aversion for the reasons I just showed you in the standard model, which means that they're willing to pay to avoid risks. That's called insurance. They require payment to accept risks. One of the places we see that is that people require higher returns for stocks than bonds. You have to find, I'll show you this in a second. And people are unwilling to accept better than fair gambles in a lot of situations. Doesn't mean that people will reject any better than fair gamble, but better than fair means expected value greater than zero, and risk aversion in the standard model is what makes people reject such gambles. Okay, let me give you an example. So this is Nick Barberis, who is the most important person in the field of behavioral finance. So if you're going in that direction, Nick Barberis is the one to pay attention to. Juan, I'm afraid to say I actually don't know who that is, although I think he's actually a non-trivial player. And this is Dick Thaler, the usual Dick Thaler. And he's got a ton of money. And so he was able to do the following. He was able to actually offer people 500, 550 bets. That's what he did. And he did it on 4 different samples, okay? Part-time MBA students who are mostly fully employed. So this is like your executive MBA, right? 30 financial advisors at a mid-sized U.S. brokerage firm. I'm guessing you guys know just exactly how much they make, because that's the job you're all thinking about getting after you graduate. But they make something in 6 digits. 19 chief information officers and directors of equity research at large asset management firms. These guys are probably pushing 7 digits. And 34 clients of a private wealth division of a U.S. bank. Clients, right? So median wealth, 10 million. And they got the following gamble. It's exactly the one. Oh, you know what? Oh, I'm annoyed with myself. It was a hypothetical gamble. I wanted so much for it to be real stakes. And it was exactly the one I gave you, right? Win 550, lose 500. Here are the results. This is the rejection rate. So your rejection rate was 76? Is that right? 72. Okay, great. So you guys are comparable to the multimillionaires. Right? So the MBA students, 90% rejection. The advisor, 77. The CIOs, apparently they've become more risk averse by running a big business. And then these wealthy investors, 70. So you guys are like the wealthy investors. Congratulations. It's possible that what's going on is that because their risk aversion is slightly less, they're the ones who wind up with tons of money because they're willing to take risks. According to expected utility theory, and this can be demonstrated, and you'll see that. According to expected utility, these people who rejected would also necessarily, for expected utility to be the right model, reject a 50% chance of losing 10 grand and a 50% chance of winning $20 million. Okay? It turns out the reason that I picked those numbers is because for that model of diminishing marginal sensitivity to explain why you rejected the small stakes gamble, it would have to, right? So that's based on how much curvature this thing has. And so the basic punchline is that for a curve to have that much curvature to explain the small bet, it would have to have such massive curvature that it would make you so risk averse over large stakes that you basically would probably, you're the kind of person that would have a probably risk preference that would, you'd just say, look, why don't we just end it now, put me in a box, put me in the ground, because that at least is a certain outcome, right? So that's the kind of degree of risk aversion that we're talking about here. All right, and this is implausible. Now, we've seen implausibility arguments before, and we'll see them again. Implausibility arguments come in various colors, okay? They're slightly implausible, like the mug. The mug thing was pretty implausible. This is like crazy implausible, right? There's no way. Yeah.
It's not assuming that you give them $10,000 first.
It doesn't actually matter, because, so this is a very important question. Say it? Jack. So this is a very important question. Jack's question is, does it matter, in some sense, if I understand your question, sort of, does it matter whether we are doing this before or after I give you the 10 grand? It shouldn't matter, because this curve should describe your preferences regardless of where you are now, right? So if you started here, the downside, I give you 10 grand and take it back, puts you in the same place in terms of final outcome as if you start with a reference point of your current wealth plus the 10,000. Your utility should still be based on exactly the same point in a curve that doesn't change, which goes back to your question, right? That's where we're going. The thing doesn't change. It's not dependent on your reference point. So your utility for this gamble, when, we could do this. We could say, let's take somebody who's here, and the same person when they're like fabulously wealthy, and ask them how they feel about, a risky trade-off in this region. Their answer should be the same, regardless of where they are. Okay? That's why you get this contradiction, right? Is because this curve, this one object in our utility, in our model, is supposed to explain all of your risk choices, and it can't.
So you said that at those 2 different wealth levels, that the risk aversion, like they should not be the same. They wouldn't think that pretty good wealth.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. That's what this model implies. Well, so relative to this point, they're both catastrophic losses.
Right, but to the low one, right?
I think I tried to make this so they're both gains for this guy and both losses for that guy, and it shouldn't matter because the expected utility of a 50-50 chance of these 2 outcomes is numerically the same regardless of where you are at the moment.
I thought that because that slope is